Welcome to video 3 of the Divided Kingdom stage. Here we're looking at, last time there was a mistake on one of the charts. Appreciate Dr. Gigi to point that out to me, make sure I got a correction on here. Always appreciate the helps like that. Jehoahaz, I believe on your screen you had him as the 10th king of the north, and he is actually 11th, so you might want to make that changes. Some of you may have saw the text last week, but if not, make those changes as to the number of kings, that he was. Northern kingdom is kind of hard to discern exactly how many kings they had because of Omri and Tibni. We'll look at that later, but how that they both claimed to be king. Tibni was defeated by Omri, and Omri continued as king. Then his son Ahab, and actually Ahaziah and Jehoram, his two grandsons, would reign. But nevertheless, for sake of your chart there, make sure you get that correction made. This week we'll begin with Zechariah, the 14th king. Of course, remember now, this Zechariah is not the same character as the one in the book of the Bible. Obviously a different character altogether. This one reigned for 6 months. He was murdered, ended up being murdered by Shalem, the next would-be king. Again, evil king, just like all the kings in the north. Pretty safe to say, no good kings in the north at all. Shalem, now the 15th king, he reigned for a very short time. As many of the kings did. He reigned for just for 1 month as king. He actually murdered Zechariah to overtake the throne, and of course then he ends up the law, what we call law of retribution, I guess. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Here we have Shalem, who murders Zechariah for want of the throne, and now he instead gets murdered by Menahem. Very, very wicked man. Menahem would be the ruler for several years, 10 years, I believe. But nevertheless, Shalem's reign didn't last. Yeah, Menahem reigned for 10 years here. Again, murdered. Military coup, very common in the northern kingdom at that time. A very wicked man, Menahem. Unusually brutal. In fact, it says, then Menahem smote Tipsha and all that was therein, and the coast there from Tirzah, because they opened not to him, therefore he smote it. And all the women therein that were with child he ripped up. So, very horrendous man. Just a very cruel men at that time. This was a time when the Assyrians now had their eyes on Israel, the north, and were going to overtake it, and eventually they would. We say backed up the screen here, he reigned from 752 to 742. Eventually in 721 they would take them into captivity, but we have kind of like at the beginning stage here. If you remember, the southern kingdom went into captivity beginning in 606 BC. That's when Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were taken. Many other young people at the time were taken in. And then in 597, Ezekiel was taken into captivity, and as well as Jeconiah or Coniah, the wicked king that God cursed, would be taken into captivity. And then in 586 BC, the final destruction of Jerusalem would take place with the destruction of the temple on the 9th day of Av. So you see from 606, 597, 586. Well, same thing here with the northern kingdom. It kind of took a little bit of stages as it went in. It didn't all happen at once. With Menahem now as a king and a wicked king, he wanted to remain king, so he ended up bribing the Assyrian king, Pul. Says, and Pul, the king of Assyria, came against the land, and Menahem gave Paul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hand might be with him to confirm the kingdom in his hand. So he wanted to stay in charge, and he decided he would pay them to be king. Of course, he would pay them not out of his own money. He raised money by imposing a huge tax upon the rich. He said, exact money of Israel, even of all the mighty men of wealth, of each man 50 shekels of silver, to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Syria turned back and stayed not there in the land. So he bought him some time. Did whatever Assyrians wanted, but in the meantime he got pretty much what he wanted as well. And then Pekahiah would become king. He reigned just for 2 years. Again, a wicked king, evil king here. One of his army commanders, named Pekah, ends up conspiring against him and killed him in the king's palace. He didn't last too awful long, a couple of years. Then Pekah here, since he took over the kingdom, he had to reign for 20 years. He was an officer in the preceding administration. The man that he killed, Pekahiah, he was one of his officers, and he took over the reign as king as well. Now remember again, Assyria's got their eyes set upon Israel here at this point. The king now, Paul, was the king that first took tribute from Menahem. Now Tiglath-Pileser is the king, and he invaded land, actually carried off many of the Israelites into captivity at this point. Pekah then joined military forces with Rezin, the king of Syria, trying to destroy Jerusalem when Ahaz was the king of Judah. Ahaz was the father of Hezekiah, very wicked king. But God told them through the prophet Isaiah that they would not be able to take Jerusalem, that they would fail, that the lines would fall. Pekah did, however, wage battle against Judah of the south, and ended up killing 120,000 men in a single day. And God allowed this to take place because of the wickedness that was going on in Judah as well. Even though Hezekiah would soon become king, a good king. Again, Ahaz was wicked. Isaiah 7, of course, very familiar passage to you. This is a passage where God gives a prediction concerning the virgin birth. Actually, he ended up giving it to Ahaz. God sent Isaiah to him to tell him that God would give protection, and then God was willing to give Ahaz a sign and asked him whatever sign it was that he wanted to prove that God would keep his word. Well, Ahaz refuses a sign. He didn't want help. He didn't want God's help, so he doesn't want a sign. And so God gave instead the prophecy of the virgin birth to Ahaz. I always thought that was kind of a strange one to be giving it to. However, God knew exactly what he was doing. Isaiah 7:1 came to pass in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. And then verse 7 was the promise. God said that it shall not stand, shall not come to pass, that the northern king would not have the ability to take over the southern kingdom at this point. And then Pekah and Hoshea. Hoshea is the last king of the north. I have him listed as the 19th king. And again, there's some debate over the numbers here. And I understand the debate. You have the first 5 kings. There's no problem, the kings of the north, as to what kings were. But it's the 6th king that there's debate. That's Omri, O-M-R-I, and Tibni. Both wanted the throne, and they basically fought over it for a little while until Omri proved victorious, and Tibni did not stay as a king. Some will count him as king. If that's so, then all my numbers here from king number 6 to the end will be off by one. The last king, it would make a total of 20 kings instead of 19. I don't count him because I don't think that he officially took office as king. He won it and kind of self-ruled. It'd be kind of like with when David became king. We know David reigned for 40 years, but at the same time he became king, Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, decided he wanted to be king. And he actually reigned for 7.5 years. So, was David king for 40 years? He was king over Hebron, over 2 tribes for 40 years. But over the whole nation, he was only king for 32.5 years. So it's one of those debates. Do we count Ishbosheth? Most people don't count him as one of the kings. Most of the time people will say with the southern kingdom, the first 3 kings were Saul, who reigned 40 years, David 40 years, and Solomon 40 years. But you could technically want to put Ishbosheth in there, kind of stirring those numbers up a little bit. Same thing true with this. Hoshea conspired against Pekah and ended up murdering him, taking the throne. Hoshea would reign for 9 years until 721 BC, when the Assyrian army would finally defeat the northern kingdom. We have 722 here. Depends on what time of the year the kingdom was taken over. Their calendar in those days, it's kind of strange because the northern kingdom, the new year began in March. Southern kingdom new year began in September. March, April for the north, September, October for the south. Remember, their months aren't exactly fitted with our months. But, so some will say 722, 721. Both can technically be correct. Depends on what kingdom you're talking about at the time. But nevertheless, Hoshea does end up being defeated, and Israel is taken into captivity. The northern, or the Assyrian king at this time now, is Shalmaneser. Remember, you had Pul under Menahem, then you had Tiglath-Pileser, and now you have Shalmaneser. And so at the beginning of the reign, Hoshea was threatened by this Assyrian king. And he first attempted to appease him with tribute money, but apparently the Assyrian kingdom at this point would have nothing to do with this. And so he ended up taking the northern kingdom into captivity. Hoshea later joined up with Egypt in trying to go against the Assyrians, plotted a rebellion against Shalmaneser, where Shalmaneser decided he had enough at this point. And so he cast Hoshea into prison. After 3 years, Shalmaneser ended up conquering Israel, Hoshea's capital city of Samaria, and carried the citizens off into captivity. This began where the southern kingdom would end up encroaching upon the north a little bit at this point, because when the Assyrians took them into captivity, they did leave some people behind. Some Jews remained behind, and also some Assyrians remained behind. And it's those Assyrians and the northern kingdom Jews that ended up intermarrying together and forming the basis for the Samaritans. And that's when the New Testament, the Samaritans were a disliked group. The Jews didn't like them because they were half Gentile. The Gentiles didn't like them because they were half Jew. And so the prejudice was there at this point. The reasons here for the carrying away into captivity, just to very quickly here, Israel had turned their hearts to Canaanite gods. Actually, even, you can go back and even say to the Egyptian gods. Remember when Jeroboam first became king? He set up idol worship, golden calves, one at the tribe of Dan and one at Bethel. They turn their children over to be sacrificed. And so the wicked there, they refused to listen to the prophets. God continually would send prophets at the time, give them the truth, and yet they rejected it. Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only, where the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They departed not from them until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he said by all his servants to the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their land to Assyria to this day. And so now Israel is settled by pagan homesteaders, again, the Assyrians and the Jews, and the remnant of Israel, the few who were left, intermarried with the Gentiles, again, as I said, and creating the Samaritan people. 2 Kings 17:24 says the king of Syria transplanted colonies of people from various nations into the populated land of northern Israel. Like I say, eventually Judah would overtake some of this, moving up north after that, and had free access into the country, northern kingdom at that point. Soon after the arrival of these people into the land, a plague of lions sent by God terrified the land. In desperation, they sent a message to the Assyrian ruler asking for the ministry of a Jehovah prophet. Isn't that ironic? They rejected God for since 931 to 721, so 210 years they reject God as a people. Now when they get into trouble and they realize that their so-called gods have not helped them one bit, they ask actually for a true prophet that the plague would be stopped. Moses actually had prophesied concerning this very thing, that the lion would come into the land. And a prophet arrived and began his ministry from Bethel, that place where the golden calf was set up by Jeroboam, and the plague disappeared. And actually we have a form of Jehovah worship that actually appeared, a form of it, as far as, you know, it's kind of like people today call themselves a Christian, but have nothing to do with Jesus. They have churches where they use the Bible in their churches, but they don't practice what the Bible says. And of course this is what happened here. It ended up being kind of the religion of the Samaritan people at this point, that they rejected the truth of the Word of God and made up their own religion. All right, next week we'll look a little bit more at this with the Assyrian captivity, and also we'll start getting into the southern kingdom of Israel, beginning with King Rehoboam. Thank you. See you again next time.